Ladies and gentlemen, please silence your phones and hush your babies. The show is about to start. Hello everyone and welcome to a live stream, which I've not done a live stream in a little while, which is, it's nice to be back. It's nice to be back with you all. Let's have a look over at the comments. Welcome everyone. This is going to be quite an interactive live stream because if you've paid any attention to the thumbnail, you'll see that today's video is Rate My Prophet. The idea here is simple. We're going to take all the prophets of the Mormon Church and rank them in the commonly used ranking system of S down to D, I think it is. Yeah, and you guys are going to give me your input as we do it. I'll probably release this as a much shorter video for those that don't want to sit through an hour of me chatting to the audience and whatnot. But some people might want to sit through that. So, we're here for everyone. We try and cater to as many people as possible. So here's the list. Let's put it on stage there. Okay. There is the list. We've got all of them. We've got little pictures. And already there's some absolutely hot takes in the comments. Luke Carter's saying that Brigham Young better be in last place. Spencer Davis is saying George Albert Smith better be S or I'm going to riot. Some strong feelings there. Mike just says they're all the worst because it's a false gospel, etc., etc. So there's a variety of people saying a variety of things about these various prophets. And the one thing to remember in this video is that my word is final. All right. So if you don't like a decision, feel free to express that in the comments. But we are going to start right at the beginning with arguably one of the hardest men to rank in this whole thing. And that is Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith is really quite difficult to rank because he started the whole thing. It was him. He started not just this church, but maybe 100 offshoots by this point. So collectively, he's responsible for a massive movement. There's no denying the sort of impact Joseph Smith had. He used similar techniques when enacting God's will through the translation of the Book of Mormon to the ones that he used while treasure digging for lost Spanish silver. We've already got a hot take from Mike saying Joseph Smith is D tier. How does one make this? And the problem is as well with doing the first ranking is that you then create a precedent by which you all in the comments are gonna judge me. And then you'll be like, oh well, Joseph Smith was this, and this guy's worse than him. So, oh man, I should have come better prepared for this because I've fallen at the first hurdle. People, let me know. Right, I'm going to read comments. Joseph in A tier simply because he spun a lot of doctrine that modern prophets are too scared to. I assume that's going to be too scared to redact. Jess is saying S tier for sheer influence. I mean, yeah, if this was like top trumps, right, or like a sort of trading card game, his charisma ranking is like off the charts. You know what? We're going to come back to Joseph Smith. I think Jess is right in the comments. We need to come back to Joseph Smith later. So already fallen at the first hurdle. We shall see where Joseph Smith ends up. Brigham Young he did Adam God doctrine and blood atonement, and depending who you ask, was sort of involved in the Mountains Meadow massacre, but not really. So what are we going to do about Brigham? The fun thing, I've tried to get some interesting facts about prophets in my research that I did before. Fun thing about Brigham Young, he tried to get his son to be president of the church by ordaining him as an apostle at the age of 11. Later on, under Lorenzo Snow, the succession rules were changed so that it was the longest serving member of the 12, not the longest ordained apostle who would become president. What that meant is that essentially, even though he'd been ordained an apostle for the longest out of anyone, he wasn't a functioning or an active member of the Quorum of the 12, so he didn't have the requisite seniority there. So they changed that rule so that he couldn't become president. Someone said, could you please define the tiers again? I think I missed it. Sure. S tier is the best. Then it's A, B, C, D. D is the worst. So down to the bottom there. I think I'm just going to start making bold calls. Brigham Young is absolutely a D tier prophet. I think that as passed, 'tis settled. We say no more. Brigham Young, D tier prophet. Yeah, that's all we're going to say. So moving swiftly on to John Taylor, who was saved by a pocket watch, but then he also had some interesting thoughts about polygamy. He talked about it being a irrevocable law, right? And a revelation that the church has finally just admitted exists, and they published it this year, the 1886 revelation. He said, "Thus saith the Lord, all commandments that I give must be obeyed by those calling themselves in my name, unless they are revoked by me or by my authority. And how can I revoke an everlasting covenant? For I, the Lord, am everlasting, and my everlasting covenants cannot be abrogated or done away with." So that's John Taylor. So saved by a pocket watch, that's pretty cool. He also, and this doesn't play well, has the largest age gap of any plural wife of any church leader. He was 78 when he married 26-year-old Josephine Elizabeth Roche. That is an age gap of what, 62 years? No, 42 years? My quick maths is not mathsing. 52 years, sorry. 52-year age gap there. So what do you think? He's heading for D tier. The only thing that saves him, and again, my word is final, the only thing that saves him is the fact he goes in C tier because he's English. There is nothing more needs to be said. He is English, therefore he is redeemed 1 tier point. Let's move on to Wilford Woodruff. I can tell some of you are not going to like this. Wilford Woodruff, he tried to end polygamy, as we've discussed. Just 1 year into his presidency, actually, he tried to end polygamy. Didn't work, as we've also discussed. He also tried to get his son in as prophet as well. He did a bit of a Brigham Young. He ordained him very young at the age of like 24. But the problem is his son died of smallpox after refusing to be vaccinated. And he died of smallpox on a visit to his post-manifesto plural wife in Mexico. He married this woman 11 years after his own dad told the world that we weren't doing polygamy anymore. So Wilford Woodruff couldn't get his own house in order, clearly. He couldn't get his son to behave and to not practice polygamy. And that kind of bad parenting does not stead people well on this list. So Wilford Woodruff is going to go in a C tier because he tried to stop polygamy. He tried to at least do something, but couldn't even get his own son to stop polygamy. So anyway, right. What are we thinking about that, chat? How are we thinking about how this is going so far? Joey Smith says, next episode is ranking Brigham's wives tier list. No, but we won't be doing that. But when we talk about Lorenzo Snow, we will be talking about the fact that he is the brother-in-law of both Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. There's nothing more like early Mormon church leader than being the brother-in-law of 2 prophets and then becoming prophet yourself, right? There's nothing more Mormon leader than that, because Eliza R. Snow was Lorenzo Snow's sister. They converted around the same sort of time, and there we are. We end up with a man whose sister then goes on to marry Joseph Smith as a plural wife, and then as Brigham Young kind of took over a lot of Joseph's plural marriages, took on board Eliza R. Snow as his wife. Bewitched here says nepotism. I'm sorry to break this to you, but there is plenty of nepotism, plenty going on here. We've got people already wanting me to get to Hinckley. We are so far from getting to Hinckley, you have no idea. But I have thoughts on where Hinckley should go. If I tell you Hinckley isn't the number one on my list when I have kind of been thinking about this before this episode, no, Hinckley's not number one, and I will tell you why later. You'll have to stick around. Okay, so Lorenzo Snow also had a cracking beard. I look at the beard on that guy. If you can see his little picture, absolutely brilliant beard. And what more needs to be said? He made tithing a more common and well-defined practice. He really pushed tithing because the church was in a really bad way financially. And remember, he stood in the way of Brigham Young's son becoming prophet by changing succession to get rid of John Willard. So remember, if anyone says, "Oh, we can't change the way that prophets are chosen," absolutely can be done. Was done a few times in the early history of the church. So Lorenzo Snow, for his beard and just generally not doing terrible stuff, he's going to get a beat here. We're moving on up in the world. If I can find Lorenzo Snow, there he is. He's moving on up. Okay, so we have Joseph F. Smith. Now, you would think Brigham Young's where it gets spicy, but Brigham Young isn't that spicy because he just sits right at the bottom. You know that's where he's going to go. It's fine. Once we start getting to like the Joseph F. Smith territory, him through to possibly Hunter is where things get really interesting. Really quite interesting. I can't believe I'm doing this. And no one else has thought to do this before. Okay, so Joseph F. Smith, pros, he actually ended polygamy. He made it an excommunicatable offense through his, what some people call the Second Manifesto, that was 1904. He also gave us hope that in the days we're living in now, where the church has hundreds of billions of dollars, he gave a statement in 1907 on tithing, where he talked about, we may not see it right away, but we expect there will come a day when you will not have to give us anything. We will not be required to pay any money to the upkeep of the church, etc. Right? I butchered that, but there is a statement on tithing that indicates there could come a time when tithing is no longer a requirement for things like temple worship, etc. We've yet to see the enactment of that, but that wasn't terrible. He has a beard so long it doesn't fit in the image of him. His beard game is the strongest, I believe, of all the prophets. He was also the last of the long-bearded prophets, though. And I wonder whether was this because with Joseph F. Smith, long beards were kind of associated with polygamy, and as they were trying to move away from it, they didn't want these long beards kicking around on these prophets. Because you notice he is the last one, and then you get Heber J. Grant goes a bit shorter, and so on. So I think Joseph F. Smith is also going to sit in B tier. He's just decidedly mid. He's also like his picture of him and his wives, I think, is in the Lion House in Utah last time I was there, which again, some more transparency there about him and his polygamy. Also, if anyone notices anything where I just haven't caught something like really egregious that one of these guys has done, please do let me know. And on the basis of what you tell me here, the short video that I make in a few weeks could potentially be revised, I think I've stalled long enough. I think it's time to revisit Joseph Smith, Brother Joseph. He started the whole thing, and I just can't get away from that concept. And I can't get away from all the stuff he got away with and the amount of times he lied about things to try and protect polygamy. And okay, right, the fact that he destroyed a newspaper that the church is now citing as a credible contemporary source. Yeah, that's Joe. I think for no other reason than I wouldn't have, so much wouldn't have happened without him. So much harm. I'm yet to see the amount of good that outweighs the harm from the church. Just on, that's a really controversial statement. That's going to get me all sorts of people in the comments. What I mean by that is, versus the amount of good the church could do, they don't do as much as they could do, and versus the amount of harm that they could reduce, they don't reduce as much harm as they could. Right? All organizations that are full of men are going to have problems There is no perfect organization. The church has the capacity to reduce harm within its institution, and it purposely doesn't undertake those steps. Similarly, they have the means with which to make a much better impact in the world, and they don't. So, in terms of the legacy of the organization that Joseph started, it's not fulfilled its potential. And because of that, I don't think he did a good enough job starting it up. And so he is a D tier boy. He is a D tier boy. And there you are. There you are. Just everyone get it out in the comments. Just really let loose. Some people are saying we've got J tier. Fair enough. We need an F tier for him. I think Joey Smith, clearly a man well qualified to weigh in on this, given that 3 of the prophets here are called Joey Smith. Theology C tier, looks B, hustle S, game S, honesty F, overall F. Fairly very reasonable, I think. Okay, cool. Let's move on. Let's move on to the man who was once pictured with a swastika while visiting Nazi Germany. I'm, of course, talking about Heber J. Grant. Now, that's not to say that he was in any way supporting Nazi ideas or the Nazi Party, but he was pictured visiting members of the church in Nazi Germany. And some of those around him, I think of J. Reuben Clark, I believe it was. Tell me if I'm wrong, but you also can't defame the dead. So I believe it was J. Reuben Clark who, according to the work of Lowry Nelson, is it Lowry Nelson? Or Lee Nelson? Lee Nelson. David Lee Nelson? The guy who wrote Moroni and the Swastika. According to, there's so many Nelsons. According to his work, I believe it was J. Reuben Clark who refused papers that could have allowed Jewish converts to Mormonism to leave Nazi Germany. And was often known to use the word Aryan to describe more desirable members of the church. So I don't think that was Heber J. Grant, but those around him. He was a prophet of the war years, as was the prophet before him. Now, interestingly, Joseph F. Smith died, I believe it was 8 days after the end of the First World War, 1918. And then Heber J. Grant died, I think, 6 days after the end of the Second World War, certainly in Europe, which I just think is wild that Joseph F. Smith and Heber J. Grant, the 2 prophets that served through the 2 world wars, died within the month that that world war ended. Fun fact. Heber J. Grant also made the word of wisdom a temple recommend requirement, possibly due to his own previous experiences with daily alcohol consumption. So, not a lot to get particularly mad about. I mean, he brought word of wisdom in, which has caused a lot of trouble for people because he brought it in a way that doesn't necessarily reflect the actual revelation itself. So he's decidedly sort of C tier. If you haven't worked it out yet, this is somewhat arbitrary. There you are. I should do a version of this that you can play along with. I've made a single-use tier list here. If I can make one that I can publish, I will put it in the comments, and you can do your own, share them, send them to me. All these little pictures will be in there for you, and you can just, you can rank them yourself. Yeah. Someone said every Mormon prophet or just LDS. That's a good point. That's an interesting point. So if do I get Denver Snuffer and Warren Jeffs and other such people all on a list as well? That could be interesting. Okay, George Albert Smith. Someone at the beginning of this video said if George Albert Smith is an S tier, they're going to riot. Well, prepare to riot, my friend. George Albert Smith was a big advocate of the Boy Scouts. In fact, he was directly involved and you could argue responsible for the adoption of the Boy Scouts program into MIA, so the youth program of the church, around 1912, 1913. We've seen what that relationship has led to. I don't think it's great for the church or for the poor Boy Scouts that suffered under that. So he brought one institution that had weaknesses that could be exploited by abusers into the orbit of another institution that had those same weaknesses. So not that the underlying thing about Boy Scouts isn't a great concept. Not that the underlying parts of the church aren't a great concept, but these institutions, when they refuse to take action to minimize the potential for abuse, um, that's when you get a bit of a problem. So George Albert Smith also was the one who said in a first presidency statement in 1949 that the ban on black members holding the priesthood and attending the temple was, quote, not a matter of the declaration of a policy, but of direct commandment from the Lord. And actually, I appreciate him for putting in black and white the thing that people will be trying to squirm out of now, saying, oh, well, the priesthood ban was just policy. It was never doctrine. He was the church president who said, no, it's definitely doctrine. So I think we're going to see him in C tier again, because something bad, something decent, a bit of nothing. Maybe, oh, this is a shame there's no C/B tier. I think I'm going to pin B tier, actually, because that would be S minus D, puts him in the middle. I think B tier, my word again, as always, is final. And this would be a good time to remind you all that you can super chat in the chats if you definitely want to make sure I see your comments. I'm trying to see everyone's comments anyway, but super chats are available. Would you be so kind as to support this work? But that's me done shaking my cup for shekels. Let's move on to David O. McKay, who is actually someone quite difficult to kind of pick up facts about. He's someone whose name we all know. As members of the church, you know, he's like a prophet that's very recognizable, but not a lot sort of going on really. He had quite a long tenure, about 19 years. He oversaw correlation, which was a big thing, and he gave the assignment to Harold B. Lee, and Harold B. Lee kind of took it beyond just correlated lesson manuals, and it started to really sort of spread out. And this is when we start to see the beginning of the church almost being run by committee, I think, under him. He was the uncle of Fawn Brodie, who wrote No Man Knows My History. She was Fawn McKay Brodie, I think. And interestingly, he was the first prophet, I think, or the only prophet to have 6 members of the first presidency by the time of his death, because he became so infirm. But because the rules were he couldn't stop being prophet just because he was infirm, he ended up with essentially 6 members of the first presidency under him to allow the church to function. At which point you would wonder why he didn't just give kind of running of the church over to the Quorum of the 12 like they did after the death of Brigham Young, for waiting for John Taylor. Why they don't have this kind of interregnum, let me know in the comments. But yeah, David O. McKay. McKay, was he the first one without a beard? We've got people talking about beards, and you know I love to talk about beards. George Albert Smith. Yes, David O. McKay is the one who looks a little bit like Tolkien in his picture and got rid of the beard. Okay. All right. Cool. That. Oh, Sepakis. Yes. Thank you for coming into the comments. Didn't you oversee the whole thing with adopting Native American children? Rings a bell. Can't say for certain because I haven't looked into it. But yes, people look into me. Look into it. Okay. He was going to go in A tier, but he's now in B tier because he's the one that gave up on the facial hair. And whether that's because he couldn't grow it or because he wanted to change direction of the church, doesn't matter. Beards are what we want. Jesus had a beard, according to all the church artwork. This is how we judge a prophet, not by the not by the measure of the changes he makes to the church, but by the length of his beard. Okay. The B tier is filling up. Well, I don't know what that says about Mormon prophets just being kind of decidedly mid. But yeah, B tier. We get to see an A tier, and maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I'm not utilizing the full breadth of the tiering system. But I'm trying to keep things, in check and honest. And I am doing this on the fly. I've not really pre-prepared this. I've been thinking about it a little bit, but I thought it would be fun to make these decisions with you all. Okay, we've got a vote for Joseph Fielding Smith, who's our next prophet, to be D tier. That's a strong opinion. Any opinions on Joseph F. Smith? Chuck KV says they personally would have excommunicated McKay for the whole beard thing. Quite right, to be honest. Mike is saying that I'm too generous, and it would be all Fs, maybe. But no, I think we are ranking them within the sphere in which they exist, right? So even if you think all Mormon prophets are bad because you think the church is bad, some are going to be better or worse than others, right? If that was your position. Anyway, should we get on to Joseph Fielding Smith because he is quite the man. So he started off 1961. So this was before he was prophet. He said, "We'll never get a man into space." Yeah, he's wrong, unless there's some people that are going to come for me in the comments. Uh, I feel pretty confident saying he was wrong about that. He wrote The Way to Perfection, which reiterated ideas that black individuals were less valiant in the pre-existence. Um, his sort of teachings were gathered up by Bruce R. McConkie as doctrines of salvation. He also wrote the volume Answers to Gospel Questions, again, full of some quite racist stuff. I can't think of many redeeming things about Joseph Fielding Smith. Anyone give me any redeeming things about Joseph Fielding Smith in the comments? Oh, Joey Smith, you are on one tonight. Was he the one that put the 1832 account into the First Presidency vault? I think so. I think you're right. And the reason he gets to use his full middle name, Mike, is because the nepotism is coming back again. The reason George Albert Smith is George Albert Smith is because there was a George A. Smith in early church history. Same with Joseph Fielding Smith. There's already been a prophet that's Joseph F. Smith, and before that, there was Joe Smith himself. Who else do we have that's guilty of such things? Ezra Taft Benson. There was an Ezra T. Benson before him. So in order to differentiate, that's what they do. Right, okay. My decision has firmly been made. Joseph Fielding Smith is D tier for cutting out the 1832 account of the Book of Mormon, not the racist stuff. Most of them were, but specifically for that crime against historianism or historical preservation. Yeah, he goes in the bin. Okay, right. Next one. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm having a great time doing this. I don't know how long this stream will end up being because we are, what are we, about halfway through, maybe? Sort of storming through. Okay, Harold B. Lee. I've got people saying Harold B. Lee is D tier, and I'm not sure why. Harold B. Lee is an interesting guy. He was principal of a school at the age of 18. Did you know? I didn't know that. That's quite fascinating. He was principal of a school at the age of 18. I think he did some teaching at 17 as well, which is quite crazy. He also established the Bishop's Storehouse program, which is still in use today. So I mean, he's got to get credit for that. So he's sitting near the top right now. Sorry, Sheepdog Combatives LLC. Thank you very much for your super sticker there. So why are we saying that Harold? Is it correlation? Is it what correlation did to the church? Because I feel like correlation took Relief Society. I think it was Brigham Young that took the power out of Relief Society. Was it not? Harold B. Lee, people were just saying racist. And I've heard when I was prepping this, I spoke to a few people and they just went, yeah, but he was a raging racist. I've not really found any evidence of it. I think there was something where he said he wrote a letter to Ernest Wilkinson at BYU saying that if one of my granddaughters goes there and gets engaged to a colored chap, I'll hold you personally responsible. So yeah, he was racist, I guess. But he's swimming in the waters of loads of racist prophets. That doesn't make him any worse than any of the others, and that makes sense. Not that racism isn't bad; it's just for the purpose of this ranking, it's difficult to just throw them all in the bottom just for being racist. Like, otherwise, we just end up with a non-interesting list, if that makes sense. He stopped David O. McKay from giving black people the priesthood. He was one of the standouts. I know that there was some softening that he stood in the way of. So, okay, let's put him in the C tier. Because I don't have the sources to hand to say why exactly what happened. But yes, I know there was issues between Hugh B. Brown, and he was basically going, "Hey guys, it looks like you're trying to step down the priesthood ban through administrative means, and actually it does need to be a revelation from God." I'm kind of aware of that in the back of my head. So for the other video, again, you should really come back for the other videos because I'm learning some great stuff from the comment section, and I could do some more research for sure. But it's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to come out here half cocked sometimes and just go on a feeling and on a gut. So thank you very much, everyone. This is why I wanted to bring this to the comment section. Right, Master Yoda himself, Spencer W. Kimball. This guy is really difficult to rank. I honestly think possibly one of the hardest ones here, and I and ahed over Joseph Smith for a little while. Okay, so Spencer W. Kimball is the prophet that ended the priesthood and temple ban for black members of the church, and he ended essentially over 100 years of overt racism. Cool, really good. Okay, if we say nothing more, then he goes to S tier, right? He's the prophet that did that. But he's also the prophet that wrote The Miracle of Forgiveness, a book that's been so damaging to some individuals that they've taken their own life because it's full of quite guilt-inducing perfectionism. So that brings him down. And then just to really kick it, he was also deceived by Mark Hoffman into buying forged documents through an intermediary. So I can't put him in S tier because he has highlighted the fact that prophets have not got the gift of discernment because Mark Hoffman managed to fool them. They were at least smart enough to buy through an intermediary, but that intermediary ended up getting killed by Hoffman. So not great, Spencer. Then, so essentially, Spencer's lack of discernment that these weren't real documents, a discerning gift that prophets claim and church leaders claim, in effect, led to the purchase of documents that created a scenario that led to tragedy. That's bad. He wrote a book that caused massive harm, but then he also was the one who stopped the racism. Or, sorry, didn't stop the racism. That carried on for a while. Obviously, it's not going to stop overnight. But he ended the ban. That's really difficult. What are we seeing in the comments? Ladrak1 is saying, race stuff is S, miracle of forgiveness is F, and they balanced out to a B, maybe. But I feel like he's done better stuff than sort of like Joseph F. Smith, George Albert Smith, David M. McKay. Is he an A tier prophet? Yeah, knocking off a few points because he lacked a supernatural ability he claimed to have. I don't know if he ever made the direct claim that he had it, but it's certainly understood that is the gift of discernment is a thing. Oh man, okay, roast me in the comments for this. I think I'm gonna have to put him in A tier because of the lifting of the priesthood ban. I think that's what I'm because there are other prophets that have also done things that show a lack of discernment. Dallin H. Oakes, who will be the next prophet, more likely than not, I would imagine, he got up and defended the salamander letter and then had to try and like backtrack. If we knocked off loads of points for every time they did something like that, so I think on balance, and it's such a tough thing to balance, and you may disagree with me, I think Spencer W. Kimball's our first A tier prophet. That's where I'm going. Decision made. We're on to some less tricky ones now. Ezra Taft Benson, where do you think he's going? Where are we putting Ezra Taft Benson? Oh, okay, right. We've got people saying, ew, no, no, no. Okay, right. I'm getting not abuse. But the Lamanite program. Have I missed something again? With Spencer W. Kimball, I think I've got an image in my head now. Spencer W. Kimball talking about the child becoming several shades lighter. I do recall that now. And the Lamanite program. Oh man, Spencer W. Kimball is proof that these guys are so complicated. But I think he's gonna have to drop down a tier. I think he's gonna have to go to B. The placement program, but he's right at the top of B, right? We'll put him right up next to the letter. Okay, yeah, fair. All right. Ezra Taft Benson it is. Incredibly right wing, this man was. Um, he was obsessed with communism. In the later video I'll do on this, I'll insert clips of him talking about communism over the pulpit at General Conference, talking about the civil rights movement being a communist plot to destabilize America. You know, he was a member of the Birch Society, and through the Birch Society, they tried to sort of get him to run for president. And then when first as vice president and then as president, or the other way around. He also said a living prophet is more important than a dead prophet. He did mellow when he actually became the prophet, but I think he was just so old by the time it happened. He kind of had lost the punch. But he is an immediate D-tier prophet, Ezra Taft Benson. Saying a living prophet is more important than a dead prophet. What does that make scripture? What does that make scripture if a living prophet is more important than a dead prophet? Because the scripture is just the word of dead prophets. It's such a narcissistic thing to say that, oh, well, my words as the guy who's alive is just more important than anyone who came before me. All right. Yeah, that's where we're going with that. That was quite easy. To be honest, I still can't believe Spencer W. Kimball. It's just so difficult. Okay. Are we ready, kids? For Howard W. Hunter, the shortest president, the shortest reigning president of the church. He was the first president of the church born in the 20th century, and he was the last to die in the 20th century, which is interesting. He shrugged off a bomb threat in 1993 at the Marriott Center. A guy got up and threatened to blow everyone up, and he kind of just stood there. And then security tackled him, or some people tackled him, and he just carried on with his sermon like it didn't happen. He also fell over in conference, broke 3 ribs, got up, just carried on as though nothing had happened. And in the clincher, he had a dance band called Hunter's Crunaders, and they did a cruise ship tour. Okay, I'll be able to put pictures of all this in the next video. So he is our first S tier prophet. I honestly couldn't think of anything. I mean, he was there for 9 months. What could he have done wrong? But Howard W. Hunter is our first S tier prophet. He had a dance band that went on cruise ships. And I was talking to Peter Bleakley earlier, and he said that Howard W. Hunter came to the Albert Hall and gave a sermon, and it was really nice to hear a sermon from a prophet that wasn't guilt-inducing. It was about just moving on, accepting you've made mistakes, doing your best to put them right, and then just moving forward and not constantly looking back. I think the thing was, his metaphor was, if you're plowing a field and you look backwards at your furrows, then they will be crooked. The idea is you need to look forward and keep an eye on moving forward, and not getting bogged down in your mistakes. So what a guy. If someone digs up any dirt on him, then do let me know. But he seems like he was a great prophet, and he was always a little bit not quite cut from the straight Mormon mold, right? He seems just like a nice guy who ended up in that position. So we've got Chuck saying that Hunter continued to let Satan win by not discontinuing the use of Mormons. We will get to that, but yes. All of these men essentially are guilty of providing Satan with a major victory by letting the nickname Mormon continue, according to the current prophet. But we'll get to our current prophet after we get through another kind of difficult one, which is Gordon B. Hinckley. Okay. Joey Smith, you're coming in absolutely clutch tonight. Did Howard W. Hunter really survive polio? Wow. All right. I mean, probably what Joey Smith's doing, right, is jumping on Wikipedia and just looking these guys up. I did my best to avoid that because, as you know, I like to try and use church sources where possible. So I was kind of looking at what the church would say about people and about things that were going on, and corroborating stories about them and whatnot. So Gordon B. Hinckley, everyone's favorite cheeky chappy. Well, he's everyone's favorite cheeky chappy apart from Russell M. Nelson. Russell M. Nelson doesn't care for him too much, I wouldn't imagine. That we'll get to that. Now, Gordon B. Hinckley, he came up with the B's, right? Whatever it was, be kind, be happy. It was this positive messaging that he came up with. He had his walkie stick, he'd shake it around, very happy. Everyone's, lovely. He understood PR. He would go on TV, he'd do interviews. I knew Mike Otterson for a little while, who arranged the Larry King interview, I think it was, or the 60 Minutes interview that he did. And it was great. As a PR machine, Mike Otterson knew what he was doing, and so did Gordon B. Hinckley. The problem was he wasn't always honest on TV. For example, he said to, I believe, a German reporter, tithing info belongs to the members of the church. Well, I mean, the members of the church haven't seen it since 1959. So his whole idea of the reason we don't publish our numbers is because that information belongs to the church members. Well, the church members aren't seeing it. So that's Hinckley. He also oversaw the creation of the shell companies that hid the size and nature of the church's wealth from the public and church members, or those clone LLCs. The thing the church got fined for by the SEC started under Hinckley. So yeah, he's everyone's cheeky chappy, but I think underneath it all, he actually was, he was responsible for sort of this micro temple building and all this sort of stuff, and trying to make the church look good publicly. But underneath it all, he was hiding the wealth of the church, and he wasn't being honest with the media and the public. So he is a C-tier prophet. He's fallen from grace. And I know everyone always cites Gordon B. Hinckley as being, their favorite prophet and all that sort of stuff. But that's what we got. He oversaw the creation of this stuff. He cost the church $5 million. Yeah. Right. We're on to Tommy Monson now. Tommy Monson. He can wiggle his ears. That's S tier material right there. He was the prophet of my childhood. He oversaw the I'm a Mormon campaign. He was bishop at 22, so he lived a life of church service, and he understood what it was like. I think because he went from being a bishop essentially to an apostle almost, I think, because he was an apostle in his 30s. I think he took with him an understanding of what it was to serve at the local level in the church. I think that did well. Negatives, he did allow the shell company nonsense to kind of continue, although he was president of the church for 10 years. His dementia kicked in the last maybe 4 years. So he allowed this to go on. And Prop 8 happened under his watch, I believe. So he's not S tier. I think he's an A tier prophet, though. I think. And I think a lot of that is bias for my childhood. Yeah, that's where he is. He's our first A tier prophet. Loads of people are not happy about that. Monson said we're not a wealthy people. Yeah, I mean he did lie about not having any paid ministry and stuff like that. This is an intensely subjective list. I will remind you all. People are saying Hinckley's the one that purchased forged documents from Hoffman. I know he's in the pictures. He may even have been influential, but Spencer W. Kimball was the president at the time. He bears ultimate responsibility. Okay, anyone give me a reason why Tommy Monson shouldn't be A tier? Any reasons at all? Thank you, by the way. We've got 322 people watching, which is really cool. Thank you, everyone, for watching and taking part. No. Oh, someone said no. Someone said if we talked about my man Hugh B. Brown in passing, we have. Okay, cool. Oh, yeah. Okay, he did do the mall. He opened Let's Go Shopping. He opened City Creek. That's true. That is true. Okay. Does he end up? Does he end up in B tier? Oh, do I? I think so. I think so. Spending $1.5 billion of money that's meant to be for a rainy day to build a shopping mall. Not great. The exclusion policy as well, that I believe was Nelson. I have no proof, but the way that Nelson was kind of the one to sort of announce it and say that he was in the room and he saw it, right, happening. It felt like it was very much Nelson's thing. Yeah, I mean, Spencer Davis is like Nemo's rage bait and everyone pretty much. If you walk away from this video happy with the decisions I've made, I've not done my job. Frankly. So just look at the cut above the rest that Howard W. Hunter is. Look at him go. Right, well, speaking of Nelson, let's look at the man who undid all the hard work of particularly Hinckley and Monson to make Mormon mean more good, to make Mormon be a word that's associated well. He went, we should get rid of it. Just get it gone. Called it a major victory for Satan, threw the last two prophets before him under the bus. And I think throwing Gordon B. Hinckley under the bus probably gives him a unique pleasure because in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, there was a pair of conference talks, one first given by Russell Nelson, where he said that we should use the full name of the church and we shouldn't be accepting nicknames. And then Hinckley comes up and says, I want to thank Elder Nelson for what he said. But here's why we should keep the nickname Mormon. Here's why it's great. And I think I've done a whole video on this. You should check it out. I think it's called The Divine Feud. Check that out because I think this has led to a life of Russell M. Nelson trying to outdo Gordon B. Hinckley. And he has tried to do it in so many ways, building more temples or announcing more temples, we should say, than Gordon B. Hinckley did. He's lived longer than Gordon B. Hinckley did, and Gordon B. Hinckley was the oldest prophet of the church from to that point, I believe. Russell M. Nelson is the first prophet to reach 100, and boy, did he make sure we knew about it because there was a big birthday bash with balloons and everything. But yeah, I think he's a really easy person to put in D tier. And he's really easy to put him in D tier because he wants it so hard. Right, I don't think I can think of a contemporary example right now, but someone that really wants like an accolade or something, someone that really wants something, wants to be loved, wants to be liked, makes them unlikable, I would imagine. And so that's where we're going with Russell M. Nelson. He lacks the warmth of the two guys before him. Say what you want about their actions. There was a warmth that came off Thomas S. Monson and definitely a warmth that Hinckley carried. Hinckley was loved. He was beloved. You know, when we had this 95th birthday celebration, it felt like everyone wanted that to happen because everyone wanted to celebrate him. It felt like Russell M. Nelson dragged people off the street in order to attend the birthday party of the glorious divine leader, kind of like they would in a sort of authoritarian state. Not saying that's what he did. I'm saying that's the feeling it kind of gave off. It felt more like leader worship than the celebration of someone for reaching a life's milestone. Having watched both the birthday party videos myself. So yeah, that's where we're at. That is the tier list. So I will make a version of this, which you can play along with. I'll do my best to make that quite quickly. So check the comments for that. Come back and check the comments for that. I'll put a community post out with it as well. Thank you everyone very much for your super chats. Thank you very much everyone for joining in and for playing along and for all your comments. Everyone is going to be mad about this. If this is the third or fourth video of mine you've watched, you should probably subscribe by now because clearly you're enjoying something about being here. I'm going to try and do more lives over the next few weeks, just looking at the way my life schedule is going at the moment. But it's great to be here with you all. Really appreciate the community that's starting to build up around this channel. Thank you very much to Tanya Curry for your little super sticker there. Wonderful. I'm going to try and come up with more fun video ideas like this. If you can think of any, let me know and I'll try and do them. I think there is a tier list video in the current Quorum of the 12 and First Presidency for sure. Let's see if Bednar isn't alone in the D tier list. Right. Take good care, everyone, and I will see you next time.